Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is a review of an Obi lightsaber kit from episode 1. This kit is made by Dan Stokes, who goes by Starkiller on the RPF replica prop forums. So this kit has been a long time coming, and there was a research thread on the RPF where an RPF member who goes by the name of Dewey, whose real name is Drew, he really knocked this one out of the park. And my understanding is that he works he's an engineer and works in the aerospace, and he is exceptionally good at finding all the little details and everything you could imagine. So now part of what Drew did so well was, aside from doing a lot of perspective matching and things in CAD to make sure that his model was as accurate to the original as it could be, he actually used his connections in the aerospace industry to locate a lot of the original parts, such as this port plug, this red thing here. The purple rivet is an aircraft rivet. So he was able to figure a lot of the things out, because the prop makers, when they did these for the film, they looked for things. They specifically looked for stuff that came, like used airplane parts, because they look kind of futuristic and high-tech, right? Okay, so now, this particular replica, let's get into why this is the most accurate that's been done yet. So, if we go over the entire thing, Drew went through all of the details and found pretty much every little aspect of this that you could imagine. So, he has replicated all of the asymmetries. He has figured out, he's kind of reverse engineered how the thing was originally made. This was originally made by the machinist manually. This was not made on a CNC, because it was just a one-off piece. You wouldn't go into the time of setting up a CNC just to do one part. So this was probably made on like a typical Bridgeport, like a knee mill, and there were obviously parts that were done on a lathe. But the other parts, these things were found parts, and that's how this prop was originally designed. So what makes this the most accurate that's been made yet? Well, if you really want all the details, I recommend you check out the thread on the RPF, because there's way more there than what I could get into in a short video. But just trust me when I tell you, this is the most accurate one that's been done yet. And I do want to focus in this video, however, as a review on this kit and how I have finished the kit. Obviously, I wanted to do it justice and try to make it as good as I could, and make it as close to the original prop as possible. So I have actually modified this kit rather extensively. So the first thing I did was all the black sections, they got gray primer and then ultra matte black paint. I used a Rust-Oleum V2 ultra matte black, and it's so humid here where I live on the East Coast right now that I had to run a dehumidifier out of my shop so that I could paint the black parts without them coming out all tacky. But essentially that's what I did, and I actually finished the coat with a coat of flat black paint, because I really wanted that matte black color. So let's just start at the top and we'll just work our way down. Alright, so the first thing I did, the plate here on the emitter, which is originally is a fender washer. What I did was I took that and I ran it on a sander, like a belt sander, to get a sanded finish. That's how the original was. Moving down, I went over the emitter, and originally, as these were machined, they were cut out by the machinist, and there were some chatter marks in there, so I just took some fine grit sandpaper and just smoothed those out and make sure that looked like hand sanded as the original was. These LEDs, I went over these really carefully. I actually didn't use the LEDs they supplied with the kit because, well, here's one that came with the kit, but you can't really see, but in the center here is sort of a yellow filament, and I think these are more of a more recent manufacturer, whereas the original doesn't appear to have that. So I just used some older LEDs that I had to get the look correct. The filament inside is just all of a silver color. I also sanded the surface of them flush, each one, as you can see in the reference pics. Now the barb, this is a Parker barb, a 3/8 inch like hose barb, and essentially what we do is we just take these and take an original. Let me grab one real quick. So here's one of the original barbs, and as you can see, it's just a simple 3/8 inch hose barb, right? And essentially what you do is you take this and then you lathe it down, you cut it down so that it's shorter, and then you put a thread inside of it. And then that just threads right on to a set screw, like a grub screw inside. Now the other component is this purple rivet, and basically this is an aircraft rivet. Essentially this just goes right inside of here, and that's what gives it that sort of look. After you have to sort of thread it down in a bit, but that's what this part is comprised of. Now the piece that came with the kit, again, this is a review, so I'm going to go over the kit as I received it and what I think. The barb that I received was, the knurling looked a little bit mushed up, and that is probably just from the work holding method on part of the machine shop. Might have held that with a little bit too much force, so it flattened out some of that knurling. Now I actually did a run of these myself last year, so I just used one of those that I had on hand already. So now continuing on, now here's one of my the first I would say things that I could critique about the kit was, as it originally came, it had a thinner O-ring, and this was just rolled right on this section of the hilt, and it didn't stay in place and it didn't look right. So they did include a larger diameter O-ring, but just rolling that on there still didn't look correct. After consulting some of the reference images that I could find, what I noticed is that the O-ring seems to be recessed underneath of this outer emitter shroud. So what I did was I ended up lathing in a groove into this area for that O-ring to sit down into, so that it would then recess under there correctly. So that's what I did there. The next area of the hilt, there's what Drew calls an interrupted cut on this area, and I went over that a little bit, and because it was very sharp as I received it, so I went over that and smoothed that out. Okay, so here was my other big critique of this kit, and that is this cut-in down here. As you receive it, it's not quite accurate to the original prop. What you have to do is you have to take a file. I actually used one of these. They're just some basic Swiss files, and they're very fine. And what I did was I took and I opened these up a little bit to get more of an angle on that. So this cut isn't exactly made by a 4th axis or rotary table. Drew told me that the best he can tell from the images is that there are filing marks in there, and he actually thinks that this might be, the entire feature here might be created by hand, as basically as a correction for some possible, to cover something up that might have gone wrong. Maybe the machinist, maybe something slipped and damaged the hilt there as he was going. So it's an interesting idea nonetheless, but essentially, in order to make this part of the kit accurate, what you have to do is, very carefully, you have to just eyeball it a little bit and look at what the original, look at some reference pictures, look at what the original looks like, and then just slowly start to open these edges out without taking off too much. You can always take more off, you can't add it back, so just take your time with that if you choose to do that. So the other thing I did, the other, I would say, heavy mod to this saber was I did reprofile the pommel a bit. The reason I did that is because, well, I'm used to looking at certain reference images, so I just have an idea in my head of what this should look like. And I talked to Drew about this, and he explicitly said that they nailed this part of the hilt. So he's very confident that this is perfectly accurate. Now, to me, I don't have access to the reference images that he does. I only have access to publicly available reference pictures. So just going off of those, I went ahead and I smoothed this out a little bit. I didn't like how round this contour was here, so I straightened it out just a little bit. It's not perfectly straight, but it is more of a straight cut, which I imagine would be a little bit easier to do if you're making this on a lathe. And the other thing I did was I softened this edge up here. So again, you know, these are just things that I wanted to do. That it's not that the other way is wrong. It's just, again, this is to a certain extent very subjective, because I'm just looking at something by eye and eyeballing it and just saying, okay, that's what looks good to me. So, and I will have some pictures put up, a little picture gallery online, so you can see some nice high detail images of this, high res images of this hilt. But yeah, so this was done really well. I think this is the best, easily. This is the best one that's been made so far. I think Starkiller, I think Dan and Drew, I think those guys obviously went above and beyond. You know, there's always going to be, I don't ever want to say anything is like the end of all accuracy, because there's always going to be new stuff we're going to figure out. But yeah, I mean, as far as, you know, prop replica collecting is concerned, this is pretty much going to be it for people, and it's pretty good. You know, it really is basically 99% there. I mean, they replicated all the asymmetries, and that's never been done before. And the information that's come out regarding, you know, certain of these little greeblies, they pretty much got it. It's basically nailed down. So overall, yeah, the kit was really good. It was a little bit tricky to figure out how it goes together, but you know, if you take your time, one thing I do recommend you get if you have this kit is buy one of these things. These are on Amazon. It's like $40 for this last time, well, when I got it, and there are some small, very small millimeter hex keys that you need, these Allen wrench keys, and you'll need those for assembling this saber. There are screws in the emitter and also down here for the pommel cubes, and you need these itty bitty little wrenches to get them in and out. So I would just say, you know, just do yourself a favor and get something like this, and that way, you know, you got it for other projects that are coming in the future. But it also make your life a lot easier for this thing. Yeah, as far as like assembly tips are concerned, I would say, you know, the first thing you have to do to disassemble this is you just unscrew this piece. Now my kit actually came with two of these things. It came with an extra threaded rod and an emitter, like fender washer replica, basically. The only difference I could tell between them was that this one has like a chamfer on the edge there, whereas this one was just flat across. So if you like the way the chamfer looks, there you go, you got an option. The other thing this kit came with it came with an extra emitter piece here, and this goes in, you know, there are these two holes, and these two holes are for the screws that go underneath of the brass barb and the red button. And basically this allows you then to screw the emitter plate in concentrically. Well, you get the idea. So basically, if you don't want the wonky looking emitter, which it comes with, because this thing's really asymmetrical. You can tell if you look at it, you can see how these screws are designed to set the emitter plate off at an angle, and for it to be, it's not, like I said, it's not concentric, this other emitter plate, but this one's more accurate. So if you're going for accuracy, this is the one you want to use. So essentially, to disassemble it, you just take these out, these three screws out, you take these out, and then this whole piece will come off. And these LEDs will these will also unscrew. And then you can take everything apart, which you'll need to do that if you intend to paint the black areas. So the rest of the disassembly for the hilt is very easy. You just pull these out because they come just press fit in. So you just pull the cubes out, and underneath of those there are little screws, which you don't screw them down until they're tight. You just screw them in until basically they help you center up they help you position the cubes. But I found that the screws weren't long enough to screw them down tight, so they're just sort of loosely floating in there. But so what I did was I took each cube, I took some E6000 glue, I took a dab of that, put it inside the hole, and then pushed that onto the screw stem as I pushed it directly straight down into the pommel. And that gives you the proper alignment of these cubes. But in order to take the saber apart, you have to pull those cubes out, take all the screws out, and then the pommel will slide off. And there's this inner aluminum core, which you can see through the grip here. And that's all one solid piece from all the way up here, all the way down to what goes inside the pommel. So the only thing you have to do then is take this screw out for the cover tech, and you take the cover tech off. You can slide everything apart. So it's really pretty easy once you've done it once or twice. So moving forward, one of the other things I tried to do when I made this kit was I actually did try to replicate some of the weathering on the original. So if you look, you'll notice I have some sort of rougher brushed marks here on the neck or the choke of the hilt, and that I tried to replicate accurately. Obviously the weathering on the LEDs, there's also a sanded surface on the brass barb. All that I tried to replicate, as well as the fender washer, the sanding on that. And the other thing I did try to do was I wanted to, because I put primer on this first and then black paint, I had intended to scratch the black paint off to reveal the primer underneath to get some of the weathering up here. But that didn't end up working. It ended up just going right through. I took a little X-Acto knife and tried to carefully scrape it. It ended up just going right through the primer. So what I ended up doing was I took some of that primer and I applied it with a thin paintbrush, and that's how I got that weathered look. So it looks like the primer is sort of showing through there on the emitter, but it's not. It's just a painted effect. It would be nice if originally the black parts on this saber were cast in resin, and it would be nice if somebody at some point would cast these pieces in that resin, and then we could paint that, and it would be like totally accurate then. That would be kind of neat. We'll see what happens with that. So yeah, I'll wrap it up here. So overall, the kit is great. It's definitely the most accurate that's ever been done, and it was pretty straightforward to work on it. I don't leave things unmodified. I'm not afraid to, I'm a machinist myself, so I figure, I can try to do things that maybe your average person wouldn't want to risk doing, because, I have the machinery here for it. But, if you're not a machinist, you're probably not going to want to take a chance damaging the hilt, So the hilt is good to go as it comes, as far as I'm concerned. I just happen to be kind of crazy, and I always like to make things more accurate. I don't know if I'm just OCD or something, but yeah, that's what I do. So anyway, thanks for watching the video. Hope you found it interesting, and if you were lucky enough to get one of these kits, I hope that you enjoy it. And I want to give a big thanks to Dan and to Drew for doing this, and I look forward to what you guys are doing next. Alright everybody, take care.